ready.
Ladies, are you ready?
Yes.
Now, they pay me big bucks for this. How does this thing work?
Oh, and you're at the top. Expenditure and spending.
Good morning and welcome to our STEM principal panel. I'm Sandra West from Texas State University. This is Dr. Denise Kern. She is retired principal and working with our project. And this is Ana Mateo, who is one of our elementary principals who's working with the project. The project is called Mix It Up. And what we have done is developed a new professional development model for teams of grades 5 through 8 math and science teachers and their principals. And in doing so, we've learned a lot, if you would. We have a website that's on your handouts that you can go to, the Mix It Up website at WordPress. And we have videos on there of previous principal panels. We have all of our professional development sessions are taped on there, and we have copies of best practices, which is what you are using there, or what is part of our handouts. And actually what we would like to do today is we'd like to have a session that we're calling We Choose and You Choose. So in your handout that is green, I believe, there are the different topics that we can discuss, talk about, but we don't have time to do all of that. So each of us has chosen one. If you'd like to look over that handout and choose one that you might be interested in and asking questions about or chiming in on, you're welcome to do so. The Correlated Science and Math model, professional development model, is based on these premises here. First of all, we teach for conceptual understanding. We have a math specialist and a science specialist that have at least a master's degree in their content area. We teach for proper language. We found that there's a problem between the languages in math and science. There's some that are confusing, so we've actually developed a dictionary based on that. We use standards-based learning objectives. That would be the TEAK, so we're not developing a curriculum. We don't teach a curriculum. We teach the TEAKs, and it can vary from physics to chemistry to earth science to space science, etc. We identify the natural links between science and math. And as I said, we are identifying the confusing language. And actually, I misspoke when I said the proper language. The proper language, an example would be trying to urge science teachers to not say reduce fractions, but to simplify them. And the same vice versa for math and science, so students are not confused with it. We also identify parallel ideas. So there's a lot of ideas that are parallel, such as graphing, etc. And then lastly, we use inquiry when appropriate. Too many times people, what I call pseudo-experts, will tell you to use a 5E for every lesson. That is not correct. What the research tells us is that you should use inquiry whenever, mostly, not every time, but mostly when students are trying to understand a concept. But if it's a process or a skill, then direct instruction appears to be a better choice. So in the We Choose, You Choose, these are the ideas and the things that we've discussed or learned about what are things that can impede STEM learning, what can enhance STEM learning. And Denise has a kind of an interesting one. She calls the enhance brilliant decisions and the impede bonehead decisions. So the one that I have chosen is the first one about being familiar with STEM best practices. It is your green handout, and I've chosen the first one because most principals are not aware of the STEM specific best practices. And so what we try to do in our training is to teach the principals what those are in terms of collaboration, etc. And the one that we use particularly is, the one I'm going to focus on, is the 3 STEM lesson planning principles there. And these are our basic principles. I've tried to give you some citations at the bottom so you can go back and review them if you like. But the idea that lessons should be constructed in general, not a law, but in general, where students move from concrete manipulatives, science and math, to pictorial or representational, to abstract. Numbers and words are abstract. Rarely should a lesson begin with words and numbers. That means you do not have one size fits all where vocabulary is taught first. That's a reading strategy. There's no basis for that in the research for beginning with vocabulary in math and science. Even though it's widely advocated, there's no research base for it. The research base is begin with the concrete, manipulatives, hands-on. I've given you some examples there. So students are using tangible objects where they touch and feel. They are touching models. They're not looking at models. If the teacher's holding up a model, that's pictorial. That's representational. That's not concrete for the students. It could be kinesthetic. It could be modeling the movements of the planets, or molecular motion, or density, you know, so it's very much what the students are doing, not what the teachers are doing. And then in pictorial representation, that might be where they're looking at the graphs, etc., on a screen, in a textbook, in a handout. And then we've given you some examples there. And then abstract words. This doesn't mean that students don't end up with the academic vocabulary. They do, they just don't start with it. They absolutely end up with the academic vocabulary. And then if you look on the back page, there is a principle that says known to the unknown. That means that we start with what the students know. It may be what's in their classroom, or what's out in their schoolyard, or what's in the environment. It may be things that they know, such as mammals, like dogs or cats. And they end up learning about other mammals, such as the aardvark or the manatee. You don't start with the manatee or the aardvark. So that's the idea of moving students from known to the unknown. And then the last one is one concept per lesson. Too many times that I go into the classroom, I teach the science methods course, I supervise science and math student teachers. I have this project, and so I'm out in probably about 30 different classrooms every semester, multiple times, not just once. And so I'm looking at what are the students learning, and when I see them not learning, I see a violation of these principles. And one of them is one concept per lesson. In general, again, it's not a law, but in general, you need to teach only, or teacher needs to teach only one concept per lesson, and they're scaffolding. They may have 3 concepts in a period, so to speak, but it doesn't mean they teach all 3 of them at the same time, because it tends to confuse students. The idea of one concept per lesson it is needed to understand, because in the science teach, you have more than one concept in the teach. And so they have to be scaffolded so that students actually end up understanding them. So I'm going to move on to Denise. She's going to tell you her favorite.
Okay, my favorite is professional development. First of all, can I have you raise your hands? Here? Okay, is that good? This doesn't look well on the camera, I guess.
Doesn't sound good.
Okay, is that good? All right. How many of you are science majors? Okay, I am not either. And that's why this has been a really awesome learning experience for me. It's okay to not know. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be like a babe in the woods. I know teachers, I know leadership, I know student learning, and I know the look-fors. I don't know the STEM specific things. I'm much smarter now because I've been working with this for 2 years. I hadn't ever seen a triple beam balance before we were in a lab. How many of you have seen a triple beam balance? Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what one was. I didn't know. So I'm sitting there in the lab. Everybody else is science and math majors. I'm going, wow, this is so cool. And they're like, are you just from another planet? What's the deal? Anyway, as the leader, what you do matters. It makes a huge difference. You, as a STEM principal, you move from a manager to an instructional leader. Okay, how are you going to lead it if you're not the expert? Well, it's a perfect opportunity to put in practice and model what you want your teachers to be doing in math and science. Because the kids don't know. So the first one is, okay, you put them in a place to learn and find out and inquire. You are going to do the same thing with your teachers. When they watch you learn and grow and ask questions and fail and fall flat on your face, it shows them how to do that as well. It builds trust, because if you fail and you admit it, then they can fail and admit it to you. And that's a huge piece. They have to trust you. You have to trust them. And you have to be able to collaborate and communicate. Because as a STEM principal, you must be active in designing your campus's professional development. I don't know what your district philosophy is with that. My recommendation is that you have a conversation about that. And a very serious conversation with the people that are going to make the decisions ahead of you or above you. Because if they're going to send it out to the campus and you do this, and then you do walkthroughs and you monitor and whatever, then that's not STEM best practices, and you're not going to be able to do this. So you've got to have those strong conversations, and you have to advocate. When you know it's right, you have to advocate. You also need to know your own leadership philosophy. I go by Maggie's rules of leadership, and they are, number one, take care of the people. Number two, you say yes, and then the third one is prevent stupid. But we don't have time to go into all that today. However, you need to know that behind how you look at the world, how you see learning and teachers, because otherwise you can't differentiate for your teachers. You're going to differentiate the PD for your teachers, just like you want your teachers to differentiate and scaffold for their students. Once again, if you model that, it makes it easier for them to see what to do. Because a lot of what happens in schools that is really, really powerful is caught, not taught. Because you teach who you are. And that's how you build the relationships. The school climate, especially in a STEAM campus, matters. It matters how people talk. The conversation, the feedback, the positive environment, the questions that are not just yes, no. They're open-ended so that you can hear what kids are thinking. That's really, really, really important. So your PD needs to match that. On the paper, it'll say, not the shotgun approach where everybody sits in the room and you give the whole thing. There are some things that you probably do, processes, once again, will be step-by-step taught. But the content of teaching on a STEM campus has to be understood and experienced. So it's really critical that you do the differentiated. You look at, if you have a brand new teacher, they're going to need a lot more support and different than the teacher that has taught for 25 years and is a science or math expert. And the experts will be insulted if you dumb it down for them. And the newbies will be like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to do this because I don't understand it. It's the same as if you have, when the kids come in, it's the same thing. I've said for years, the needs are the same, just the ages change. And so you look at your staff like that, and the ones that are doing the work, it's the little red hen theory. The ones doing the learning are the ones that get the benefits. So if the kids aren't doing the learning, they're not messing with it, they're not doing that, they don't get the benefit of that. They don't get to eat the bread. Because we haven't allowed that. Same for teachers. They have to be doing the work. They have to be doing the work. And the prevent stupid part, like in science and math science especially, you've got to be paying attention to the safety stuff. They need eyewear, they need eye wash, they need test stuff. And as a principal, you need to know enough about what safety requirements there are to advocate with the district and say, I've got to have this. Because I can't keep them safe without it. I ended up getting bathrooms in my kindergarten classroom because I was on a high needs campus with when I was having a conversation with the assistant superintendent of construction. I said, you know what, I can't supervise those kids going to that gang bathroom at the end of the hall by the cafeteria. I can't see them. And then he said, well, you're not going to need bathrooms. And I said, here's the newspaper from this week. We have 10 most wanted in Cobb County, right there. And I said, I pointed to 6 pictures and I said, those 6 are parents of my children, out of 10. He's like, okay, you get your bathrooms in this classroom, but don't tell anybody else, here we go. Anyway, you, as a principal, as a STEM principal, you have to be looking, you have to be anticipating that. And if you don't know, ask. Ask your expert. Ask, involve your people on your staff. It makes a difference. Be sure that you at least attempt, and don't give up, talking with your district curriculum people. They quite probably in this day and age don't understand it any more than you think you may. It's a learning process. So model it, but be gutsy enough to say, I want to do this. This is why I want to do this. This is how I want to do this. Who do you have at the district level that can come throughout the year and help me with this? What kind of funding can I get for the equipment? How can I do that? But the professional development that you build within your whole campus will speak to the climate, it will speak to the behavior standards, it will speak to how kids approach every new thing. And that's science. That's science. So you're actually modeling it and didn't even know you were doing it. So that's quite good. In closing here, I've used this phrase a lot. When we talk about modeling, when we talk about experiential learning, when we talk about introduced to whatever, you can't come back from someplace you've never been. And you have to build those experiences with kids. The more impoverished your student population, the more you have to do hands-on. You have to create the experiences from which they're going to build the rest of their knowledge. And so 80% of your labs, I mean, your science stuff should be hands-on, should be lab-based, should be with it. Math, same way. And it doesn't matter the grade level. We're discovering in the research that middle school and high school have got to have the manipulatives just like kindergartners. It's not baby stuff. They have to do the concrete first or they don't translate it. It doesn't move up the chain. It doesn't stick. And they don't have anything to tie it to generalize it. So, and it's learning for life. So, Wendell said to me this morning, he was trying to find the place and he keyed in the address, couldn't find it. So he copied the address, pasted it in there, and it came up. He said, so I'm going the right way, but I'm not there yet. And that's what you are going to be doing. You make good choices with your professional development and the way you design your campus, and you'll be going the right way. It'll take a while to get there. Don't be impatient, but you'll get there.
I realized I needed to add a little bit to this. This is a grant where we train teams of grades 5 through 8 math and science teachers and their principals. The grant requires at least 105 hours. We have had 2-year and 3-year grants with the same people in it. However, what we have found is that we do not see changes in the classroom until after 170 hours of intense instruction. 70 hours of summer, another 30 plus hours during the academic year, and another 70 hours in the summer, and that next fall is when we start seeing best practices occurring. We have 3 days of principal training. We have 2 days while they're on contract during the summer. In fact, it will be next week. And then we also require principals to come in during our teacher training. And the reason for that actually was from principal requests. They wanted us to, they wanted to know what their teachers were doing. And they wanted to make sure it was not sit and get, which ours absolutely is never sit and get. But what we need to do is to have the principals learn like the teachers do, just like Denise was talking about. It is really funny to watch principals struggle with learning and then learning with the hands-on. Then they get the need for that. The other thing that I think we neglected to say was, how do you get to STEM? There's no definition for it. You know, it can be siloed, it can be integrated, etc. And we decided early on, about 6 or 7 years ago, because we've been doing it this long, is that the easiest thing to begin with is to integrate math and science. That is not easy. You would think it was. I thought it was. But it's not easy. And so what we do with our training over this 100 hours plus per year, the math and the science teachers never leave each other's side. The science teachers learn the math, and the math teachers learn the science. But we have a rule. If you know the answer, you can only ask questions. And so we get lots of good questioning. We have a lot of modeling of best practices that go on, a lot of debriefing for that. And I'm going to turn it over to Ana Mateo now, who is one of our principals who's been with us a couple of years, and some of the things that she likes, and we even have a sign that we made for her because of that. We make changes in the project because of what our teachers and our principals say. It's not static, it's not our idea, it's a collaboration. And we're actually building that real community of practice that is going to have to occur if we're going to see changes. And we have evidence that there is improved student performance with our teachers who are in this. And we have controlled teachers in campuses. So we have the evidence that it does improve not only STAR scores, but we have other evidence, additional evidence outside that we assess for in our research. Anna?
Thank you, Dr. West. So, disclaimer here, I've been coughing. I'm the only one. I'm sure the video is going to have all this coughing, so that's me, so if you'll excuse me for that. But as principals, you know, we're trying to do 20,000 different things in the middle of a day, but it all comes back to, like what Denise says, you really do need to take the time to plan and make sure that you're setting your teachers up for success. On the second part of that green sheet on the back, of that first page is the building a community of practice, and so that's what I'll talk a little bit about. So really it does take time for you to sit down and plan with your teachers and have that science and that math teacher, like Dr. West said, never leaving each other's side. The science teacher learns a math, the math teacher learns a science. And planning, we've been very fortunate in Lockhart, where I'm from, that we have teachers on several campuses. We have 4 elementary campuses. We're adding a 5th one this year. And so it's really important to make time with the teachers on in the cohort for them to plan together. And even if they're not, then those teachers that are not in the cohort will learn from the other science and math teachers. So it really, you've got to make the time for these teachers to plan, even if it's just 1 hour at the end of the instructional days where they can all meet and look at the TEKs that they're planning for the rest of the 9 weeks. So, you know, you need to facilitate that, to really push them to work together so that the kids are successful. And in those planning times, they work together to see what the unit is going to entail for the next 9 weeks. And so at that time, you know, they start to, you know, one of the other things on the first page, look at the materials. What are those consumables that they're going to need? Whether it's flour, whether it's salt, whether it's, you know, baggies, what is it? And make yourself available, or I should say, the teacher shouldn't be scared to come and ask, you know, can I borrow the Walmart card? You know, can I do a PO for $50 so we can all, you know, have enough flour or salt for the next experiment? And just making yourself accessible for that. And so if you give them that time to plan, then they are willing to put in that 80% and work towards that 80% where the kids are working, you know, from the concrete to the pictorial to the abstract. So they're getting that time in because you're facilitating that. So that's really, I just wanted to reiterate that, which I'm sure you know. But if you have any questions as we're going through, just feel free to ask.
Anna actually made arrangements for her teacher in the cohort and a teacher at another school to be off a half day for their planning. So she's really modeled that a lot. Something else that we've discovered is the lack of horizontal alignment between math and science, and we want to alert you to that. And then it's going to be your turn to choose something off of that green sheet to either ask or comment about. The math and science, people don't talk. So they don't understand why it's important for the math skill to be learned by the student before they use it in science. We know there are problems in 6th grade and 8th grade. We are suspecting that there's problem in 5th grade. The science teachers are going to be streamlined, but they're not going to be rewritten. I don't see that they're going to be substantially changed. But that means that you need to look at the horizontal alignment, and we give teachers time to do this. We give them planning time during the professional development, probably about 2 hours a day for 10 days. The math scope and sequence can stay the same and probably needs to stay the same. But the science can change, it's flexible. It doesn't matter in many cases when you teach what, in physics or chemistry or biology or whatever. So I would urge you to look at that horizontal alignment and make sure that the math skills are learned by the student before they use them in science. We first discovered this about 6 years ago in 6th grade, and I was on the writing team for the science teach, so I was familiar with the problem already, and I went to the TEA math coordinator and I said, will students know how to do this math in terms of calculating density or speed, which is what they have in 6th grade? And she said yes. Well, what we didn't realize is that too many districts just march through the science teach. They don't look at them. They just, that's not how they were written to be that way. And so calculating density is in September. Well, they don't learn the math skill to do that till November. And so the science kids were confused the whole year until actually the math teacher went back and redid the science lesson with the same lab, investigation, etc., and it cleared up for the students then. So we would urge you to look for that. And that's part of that collaboration that Anna's talking about, and that time to do it is when you discover those problems. So if your kids are not scoring well in math, that may be an issue. And if they're not scoring well in science, that may be the issue that they're having a problem with. So now it's your turn. Who wants to choose something on the green sheet that you either want to discuss or you want some more information about?
I'll choose.
Okay, let me give you the mic.
Of course, love language just sticks out to me. I don't know how many we came to any of my sessions, but I just think that affirmation is so important, not just with the students, but with the staff as well, and that it's a team effort working together, because we all know as administrators, we can't do our job with the people without the people that we have teaching the kids. So I think that's important.
For those of you not familiar with the love languages, there are theoretically 5, and it's how someone knows that you care about them. My love language is service. I need my husband, wonderful Wendell there, I need him to do the dishes, not buy me big diamonds. Somebody else?
I thought it was kind of interesting.
Hold on, let me give you the mic.
I thought it was kind of interesting that you said that you don't have to teach the vocabulary prior to learning or the lesson, because you're right. We have been taught that that's what we needed. I was a math teacher, I wasn't a science teacher, but we always introduced the vocabulary before we actually engaged in the lesson. So I thought that was something different.
Yes, there are a lot of pseudo-experts who get a big bucks for coming in as consultants and teaching that, and it's a reading strategy.
I have one. How many of you are elementary principals? How many of you are secondary? Okay, well, good, interesting. And you know that elementary principals or elementary teachers, most of them are reading, right, experts, and that's a big push. And so it's hard because you want to do the vocabulary first, because you want to do the pictorial first, but you've got to just, I must walk around with that sign that says concrete, pictorial, abstract, so it really is important.
Actually, Anna has requested that we make a poster for her, 12 by 18, if I remember correctly, so that she's going to put it up in every classroom as a reminder. Okay, other questions? Hold on, let me give you the mic.
Can you talk about hiring and where you've gotten some of your most successful teachers, either through university programs or other programs that teachers have come from that you have seen be most successful?
I worked as an AP one summer and decided I liked science more, so I've never done hiring. But I can tell you, in working in teacher education and working in a lot of classrooms, I can tell you that, in my opinion, I'm at Texas State University, so we have a large program. You will not find any kind of preparation any better than a traditional program, assuming it's, you know, a good program. Our elementary teachers have to take 16 hours of science, and they're not traditional science courses. We have 2 of them particularly that are specific for elementary teachers, and we have 2 physics courses that are specific for elementary teachers. So they're not, you know, the traditional ones. We have my science methods course, which is for middle school and high school. I have them 100 hours per semester. And then I'm out supervising them, I'm with them, you know, a lot. And you don't get that kind of development with non-traditional. Alt cert programs, they have them 6 weeks in the summer, but it's a, you know, it's a quick and easy way to get into the classroom. But it's not effective. We do not have effective teachers generally. There's always an exception with those kind of programs. So now I'm going to turn it over to someone who actually hires.
I had a very high needs campus when I first became principal, and I was principal of the campus that was noted for, that's where all the other principals figured out to transfer the bad teachers. So it had a really horrible reputation, to the point that I got, in the 8 years I was principal, I had 1 request for a transfer within the district for teachers to come to my campus. So as a new principal, I'm recruiting. So I went through the applications, everybody coming from out of state. I'm like, I'm interviewing. A lot of military families coming in, a lot of, you know, the spouse was going to a different job, a higher job, whatever. So I looked for experienced teachers that were willing to come, and then do that. I usually had a committee on for hiring. I would choose somebody on my team. My AP was really good at picking stuff up. My team leaders often would sit in, just so that I had a couple of other people there. We would each design a question, and then we would go through. There are 2 questions that are key in watching for whether they're going to be a fit for your campus, and it's how they see the world. It's how they look at children and learning that you're really listening for. My mentor, Maggie, taught me that to ask the first question. It's this: what brings you to be applying for this? Why don't you spend some time telling us a little bit about yourself, and what brings you to be applying for this position? And then she said, quote, sit down, listen, and shut up. And just listen for as long as they want to talk about that. She said, because that could be your only question. They will tell you what you need to hear. Then you can ask the second question. Ask it about, you know, describe your classroom to me. So as they describe, what you're listening for is, how do they handle misbehavior? How do they handle when a kid acts out? How do they handle it when the kid asks questions? Do they ask questions? Do they have red light? Do they have, I mean, they're, back in the day, they may still be there was a program called Assertive Discipline, where the teacher became the secretary, and you just put check marks up on the board, and you just kept doing all that kind of stuff. Well, how much choice for kids is there in that? I mean, it's totally the antithesis of what you want in a STEM, you know, classroom. So listen for teachers saying, I don't ever have discipline problems because I have this system, and then we do check marks, and we put the name on the board, and then I send it to the corner, and then I send it to the office, or whatever. Okay, that's not going to be a good fit, because you want kids that are going to ask you questions. And to tell you the truth, the little stinkers are lots of times the most fun and the most creative in terms of problem solving. Is it challenging? Oh yeah. It's like trying to keep ahead of my 2-year-old granddaughter, or your 2-year-old twins. That's what you want, because then you learn with them, they learn with you, and everybody learns together. You have to have some parameters, but that's what you're listening for. You're listening for a teacher that says, you know, I just really don't ever have difficulty with that because I set my classroom up like this so that they can do thus and so and thus and so and thus and so. I said, you know, I teach them the behavior standards, what's expected when they have to go to the bathroom, what's expected here, what's expected from behavior hallway behavior, that kind of stuff. So you're listening for the fit and go with your gut. I mean, you know when they walk in the room. True story. I had one applicant that came in and I said, so, you know, tell us about yourself and why you were applying for this position. Quote, well, I got non-renewed in my other position and it wasn't very fun.
Interview over.
That's right. Well, you do have to like, I thought my assistant principal was gonna fall off the chair because she wasn't looking at him. Oh, yeah, anyway. So I did have a little code with my team. I said, okay, I'm gonna ask the first question. If I ask the second question, then we're gonna get to your question. But if I don't ask that second question, this interview is over, and we're just gonna make some small talk, and then we're gonna be saying, thank you very much for your time, and bye. So, but design it ahead of time. Think about what you're looking for. What do you want for your fit in your campus? If you're starting a new campus, it's really fun to do it that way. It's like terrifying, because you don't know what you're getting. But you decide. You decide what the campus climate needs to be. You decide how you want the learning to happen in the classrooms. And then you find a fit. You find a match. So does that answer your question? Does that help? Anna, you want to
Let me say one thing. Anna, you want to come over here in the campus range here? I would say most of the times I hear administrators asking teachers to teach a sample lesson or at least tell about a sample lesson. If that sample lesson doesn't begin with a concrete experience, you know that they don't understand at least those best practices. So, you know, to look back at the best practices and to understand how important they think the teacher thinks those best practices are in children learning.
In Lockhart, we have a very specific process for interviewing whenever we have teacher availabilities or, you know, teacher resignations. And so we have what we call a search and interview committee, a screening committee. So basically, you know, they post the job and you have 30 applicants. So literally you have to sit with your screening committee and go through every application. And you need to decide with that screening committee what it is you want from this teacher and look at the rest of your team. So if there's 4 people in a team and you want somebody for math and science. If it's 5th grade, are you going to want for it to be departmentalized? Because, you know, just depending on your teachers, your staff, just depending on your kids, the makeup of your kids, you know, are your teachers going to be self-contained or are they going to team teach? Or are you going to departmentalize in 5th grade, for example? And so you have to look at your need and then decide what type of person. Do you want a science math person to team with somebody else? Or do you want someone who's really good and is just going to be self-contained? So we as a screening committee, we have to make those decisions first. And on the committee, we are required. So it'll be myself and another admin person, whether it's my assistant principal or my counselor. And then we pick another teacher from that grade level. If it's 5th grade, we'll get the team chair or someone else who can help us interview as well. Then we come up with the questions and then we interview. And so when we invite that person in, one of the questions will be, what's your favorite subject to teach? Okay. What subject do you think you still need to grow? And so just by talking with the person, you know, then you ask, you know, how do you feel about professional development? Or, you know, I just kind of plug in, you know, we're working with Mix It Up through Texas State, and how would you feel about, you know, having 170 hours plus in PD? And, you know, so you kind of just, you know, get that. And then the typical question is, if I walk into your classroom during a science lesson, or if I walk into your classroom during a math lesson, what would I see? And if you get that, well, there's going to be a lot of movement, and, you know, and noise doesn't really bother me if the kids are interacting or they're working on a project. You know, that's kind of, to me, that's kind of like, okay, so they're not in rows, they're not organized, they're not just sitting doing worksheets type thing. So Those are the kind of questions that we ask at the time.
I thought of one more thing, big surprise. To build on what Sandra was talking about with the alt cert, as a principal, if you're in a high needs campus, often that's not the favored place to go. So you have to do a real sell job. The other part of that is sometimes you get to the point where you have to look at alternatively certified people. I mean, hands down, you go with the traditionally trained programs first. And then if you can't fill, you can look at the alt cert. If they have a degree in the area that you're looking for, if they already have a degree, and then they've gotten their teacher certification, you start there. You just know, if you find out that they are passionate about teaching and they have kind of the right teaching philosophy, you know that the alt cert are going to be like sophomores in college in terms of teacher preparation. They do not have any of the background experiences, so they're going to need a ton of support. But if they love kids and they have an affinity for being able to manage a classroom and whatever, pair them with a master teacher that's willing to mentor and basically attach them to their hip and keep them going. I ended up opening up a classroom 6 weeks into the school year because I had growing enrollment, and it was a 4th grade classroom, which we are self-contained in 4th grade. So I'm like, okay, so I put my team leader with a gal, and I had a gal that came in, and quite frankly, I knew her parents, and she was alternatively certified through A&M. And so I thought, okay, I've got to interview her because it's a courtesy, because I know her parents really well, blah, blah, blah. Well, she blew me away in the interview. And I'm like, whoa, that little whippersnapper. So I actually looked at her at the end when I hired her, and I said, I wasn't even going to interview you. The only reason I did is because I know your mom and dad. And I said, but, you know, she answered the questions like she knew instinctively how to pull a group of kids together that had to leave their other teacher after 6 weeks. So I said, what would you do? So she step by step told me, well, I would do this, and I would do this, and I thought I'd have a little tea, and I thought I would do this, and whatever, and I'm going to talk to each parent and make sure that they know who I am, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and you've never taught before. She not only was good, those kids never missed a beat. I've never had a classroom gel like that, ever, except with her. So use your gut, but be careful. And if you have to go to alt cert, that's okay. Do not, under any circumstances, put a warm body in there. Do not do that. You're better off with a long-term sub, because it will be grief from day one. So stand your ground, even if central office is saying you put them into place. Because you can't get rid of them if you get the warm body.
I need to make a clarification, and then we need to move to the next topic. Universities have alternative certification programs, but they have a requirement from the state that the person has to have 24 hours in that content area. And 24 hours in science is nothing. I mean, it's hardly freshman courses. But in for-profits, this many hours until the new law last year, which now requires 18 hours. So there's a difference between university alt cert and the for-profits alt cert, like Teach for Texas or whatever the biggest one is. Okay, next topic. Who would like another question on the green sheet that you had an interest in or more conversation about?
I did come in a little late, but I was wondering about your departmentalization. You said, are you saying not to departmentalize before 5th grade?
Generally. Yeah, that's generally what we're saying. So, you want to talk about that? We work with charter schools, parochial schools, public schools, and we see a range. And even in 5th grade, we see schools going from self-contained to departmentalized, to where they teach only math or where they teach math and science. So we've seen a range of it. But I think the issue is, what do the children need?
And I think it's when you work with a low socioeconomic, that's your population of kids, your high needs. We've never departmentalized or even team taught any lower than 5th grade. So it starts like 5th grade on up. And it's also to help make the transition to junior high, just depending on how your district is set up, whether you're intermediate 5th and 6th, you know, and then junior high 7th and 8th. So the way that Lockhart is structured is elementary goes up to 5th grade, and then junior high 6th, 7th, and 8th. And so we start making that team teaching switch in 5th grade, so where the kids have just 2 teachers, and they just, you know, team teach, you know, like half a day with one teacher and half a day with the other. And then, of course, those teachers have to plan very well together, and with the opposite, like if you have 4 teachers on a campus and they, at that grade level, then they plan with the others as well.
I've actually taught in several different configurations. I've taught multi-age, grade 1 through 4, all in the same classroom with a co-teacher. I have taught with a model where you had a loop-up group, so you have 2 grades together and 2 teachers, and then you got just a half a replacement every year. That's been successful. I've seen the team teaching on it depends on your kids. It depends on the population with whom you're working and your staff as well. If they do co-teach, it's like being married to somebody. So you don't just put 2 teachers together and say, oh, here's your teaching partner. You have to have chemistry. Otherwise the kids don't get the chemistry and it's miserable. However, especially with the impoverished populations, their currency, they don't have a lot of money, their currency is relationships. So you think about that and put them in a classroom. If they have to leave the teacher that they're attached to for any part of the day, it's very stressful. A lot of times they come from really, really, really chaotic backgrounds. So if you've got chaos in your house, you need to know, I got this one person that I can count on all the time. And the younger they are, the more critical that is. So that they trust you, and then even if there are 2, they know you love them. So so you just have to pay attention to that. I think departmentalization oftentimes is convenient for the teacher because they only have one crack. Yeah. So anyway, hold it up. Okay. Back to the professional development. Think about what kind of climate you want on your campus. Think about the kind of staff that you're going to need to put that together. And then you make some decisions about whether you're going to departmentalize or not. I actually had an assistant superintendent say to me one year, because she knew I did self-contained all the way to 5th grade, and I would have done self-contained in 5th grade if I'd had the expertise with the teachers. But I had teachers that were secondary trained, so they were not comfortable doing self-contained 5th grade. But then the assistant soup said, no, you're going to departmentalize in 4th grade next year. And I said, and she said, end of discussion. Well, then she left the district, so then I went back to the So anyway, use your judgment.
Something else to consider is, just depending on your population, is we always have, because we have inclusion, and we still have some kids that are pulled out for resource, is making sure that the team of teachers, like in 5th grade, is going to have either an inclusion teacher that comes in to help with the math and the science, and then we